All right. Good Monday morning, everyone. It is, rainy and somewhat cold here. Not super cold, like I'm sure Russell's going to get. But, fall is in the air for us Texans. Okay. It's like 66, rainy. It's pretty good out. It's not bad. Just humid. It's just humid. But you guys are listening to Author Talk with me, Amy Russell Fern. Our lovely guest today is Philip. So, you guys, let's talk about our weekend. Okay. I'm going to kick this off because it was a doozy of a weekend. I spent half of Friday in the ER with my daughter. She had 104 temperature and, just
Oh my God.
Hot mess of a self is my oldest is. So it was that I ended up leaving. I came home and just treated her myself because, that's what us moms do. So I did that. And on top of that, there was Saturday, you guys, which you guys know that I am
It was a great day. Alabama went down. Texas won. It's a great day.
I am an Alabama fan through and through. Okay, LSU won, but Alabama did not. It's the first time they have lost to Tennessee since 2006. So let me just tell you that it was a sad day. Okay, very sad.
That was a great game, though.
Yeah, it was a great ending. I really like that ending.
Oh, Russell, it was a great game, though. It was a very good game. My brother-in-law was here, and him and my husband were going for Tennessee just because, A&M wasn't playing. So that's kind of how things rolled. But, in a nutshell, it was very nice. It was fabulous. Great weekend, other than, Alabama lost and my daughter having a temperature. But we are back in full motion this week. Yes. So what did you guys do this weekend?
Well, I went to see a play. One of our editors at Inklings Publishing, she is also in theater. She does performances with little local theater companies. And so she was in the play of Sweeney Todd.
So what is that? You act like we're supposed to know that. What is Sweeney Todd?
So Sweeney Todd.
That's the barber. That's the barber one, right?
Yeah.
Yes, the barber of Fleetwood Street.
Yeah.
Right. So he
lots of blood and gore.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And now I believe there's a movie out with it with Johnny Depp as the barber of Fleetwood Street.
Oh yes. It's so great. Yeah. It is so great.
Yeah, but you know what was interesting is I did
20 years ago or something.
Yeah, like I have never seen it. I had never seen it. I didn't know the story, so that was kind of cool being able to go see it because, usually when I go to theater, I already know the story.
Yeah.
But this was kind of cool finding out the story as I went. With them performing it, it was kind of nice.
Oh,
and they all sang really well.
It's great. I love it. It's a great.
And if you're in Houston, I believe this weekend is going to be the last performance that they're going to be offering. It's a great thing.
Well, it's really not in Houston.
Well, it's in Deer Park. It's in
Deer Park.
Which is,
like 1,000 miles from Houston.
Oh,
not that far. But it is cool to support these local companies, these local theater companies and troupes, and offer them your support and go out there and cheer them on because they're really, really good. They're actually really, really good acting and singing, and they're local. What more can we say? Yeah.
Hey, I like those. I used to live by Deer Park, so I get it. 100%. Hold on, wait, Russell, wait. Let me get everything ready for you. Okay, now you can go.
Get rid of your tab so your computer can work.
Russell.
So it's going to be in Atlanta, Georgia. It's going to be 34 degrees tomorrow morning. So if you're a former Texan or Houstonian, that means it's winter, Philip. Because for Texans, 34 degrees is Christmas weather.
Pretty much.
Well, I live in Los Angeles, so trust me, I'm aware how.
Yeah. Well, you don't even have 34 degrees for Christmas.
No.
You have swimming pool and go surfing.
We never have 34 degrees.
Right. If you did, it would be a catastrophic event, right? Right. So I went to George and Kim's joint book launch yesterday in Atlanta. There's George with his book, and they launched it today, and there's Kim with her book, and the next picture are the two books. They're on Amazon. Kim was actually on Author Talk a few weeks ago. George will be on Author Talk in a few weeks, and we wish them very good luck. Those two people are the hardest working on publicity authors that I have seen in a long time. They're every day they're doing something. They're doing like 10 book launches with this book. It's hard work what they do. You know, and George is like president of the Atlanta Writers Conference, which is a lot like the Houston Guild in Houston. And they work hard. So I wanted to give them a little publicity for their new books.
And that is good, because as we all know, right? We all know if you're an author, whether you're published by a big house or a small, or you published yourself, you're going to have to do a lot of work as you build up audience and stuff. I'm sure Philip can attest to that. I mean, you've got to be willing to get yourself out there.
Philip, how hard are you working at your publicity?
Too hard. It's one of those things. I was just talking. I spent a couple of days with an author named Thomas Olda Holvelt, who wrote a book called Hex that was a big international bestseller, and his new book is called Echo, and he's a Dutch author. And we were talking a little bit about this, and he was saying how as your career progresses and you sell more books and you have more titles out and you have more readership, you spend less time writing and more time doing administrative and promotion and talking to lawyers and talking to agents and talking to fans, readers, and promoting yourself and doing podcasts and writing guest articles and all this other stuff. And yeah, it becomes very time consuming. I've kind of got it now where I'm basically 50. I write full time, so it's my job. So I basically 50% of the time I'm doing like sort of the running the business, as it were. And 50% of the time I'm like making the donuts, you know what I mean? So it's hard. And I think when you get to a point, and then there's like the next phase where you have like you're successful and you have like more people helping you, in which kind of the writing part kind of that percentage changes a little bit. You can write a little bit more, but I'm sort of at that point where I'm doing everything sort of myself. So and I have my literary agent and I have a film agent, but there's no like team, there's no webmaster running the website, there's no social media person running social media. It's all me. So but it's a crucially important part of what we do. Absolutely, 100%. You got to do it.
And that's a key thing that you were talking about in terms of time. Time management, it's the hardest part of anybody's really success story is how do you manage time? How do you allocate time? And that's one of the things that I have found has been very beneficial for me, is that I think of time kind of like you would breaking down your budget, right? If you look at
Sure.
You say, okay, this portion of this paycheck is going to be for my car, and this is going to be for my rent, and this, and if you label it, then you're more successful at budgeting. And I feel like with time, it's the same thing. You've got to label your time. Like, okay, this hour is going to be for this, and this section is going to be for this, and especially when it comes to social media, because that is a black hole. Okay, that is a black hole. You get on Facebook, you look up, it's been the whole day, so you have to really like set some timers and parameters for like, what are you going to do and how much time are you going to be in there? And because you could just go down a rabbit hole in social media and just be lost for the whole day in there.
Ain't that
and it's difficult to do the pie chart budget thing because writing can be a little bit unpredictable as to what your focus is day to day. And for example, I'm supposed to be writing a novel right now for Tor Nightfire that's coming out in the summer of 2024. I'm not writing that novel because I'm doing rewrites on a screenplay that I thought would be way off my plate by now. And
Mhm.
I have a entertainment company that approached my agent about me writing something for them that was on a very strict deadline. So now that's taking precedent. So it's tricky, and you just try and stay above water as best you can. And I happen to I'm in the bittersweet situation of having a lot of releases pending. So I'm promoting like 4 different books right now. So you can imagine how time consuming that is to keep the website updated, to do promotional graphics, to blow your horn on social media about all these different things that are coming out, to deal with all the edits that you're doing for all these books and stories that you have to edit and revise. And so it's a I mean I'm lucky that I can do this full time. I've only been able to do it full time for about a year now. But I can't imagine trying to do this and like to have a full time job and have like a family that you have
Oh,
and all
yes.
that kind of stuff. It would be almost, I hate to say impossible, but it would be very difficult. I mean,
It
I'd get
you're
less sleep than I
definitely
already do, which is not much.
yeah, you're definitely a lot more tired when you're doing full
Oh
as
yeah.
those of us who are like Amy and I, I mean, Amy's got her family and stuff, and I've got a full-time job, but besides doing inklings and stuff, and finding squeezing out that writing time. Sometimes it's interesting as a writer because a lot of people think that writing is sort of magical, right? You have to be in the right mood, in the right place, and in the middle, and like, if I wait until all the planets align perfectly for me to have magicalness fall on me to write, that's never going to happen. I'm a working writer. I have my time for
Right.
writing, and I will sit down and I'll do what I need to do. And like you say, sometimes you're juggling projects, things that you thought you were going to be working on, you have to push back. And sometimes projects just pop up. I don't know for you, Phil, but
Yeah.
like for me, sometimes I just randomly suddenly have a story in my head and it won't shut up until I put it on paper, even just a cursory
Yeah.
putting on paper.
Yeah, that's exactly right. What I do in that situation is I just write like a page or two of like, here's the
Mhm.
story, blah blah blah, 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 and then I kind of put it aside and I focus on what I need to focus on for that day. But yeah, and I have a bunch of those on my desktop.
Yeah.
But yeah, and the thing about writing is exactly right. You got to sit. What I find is the magic, quote unquote, happens when you're sitting down and writing, not when you're not sitting down and writing. So what I tell
Mhm.
authors is to your point, allocate whatever the time is that you have. If that's 10 minutes a day, it's 10 minutes a day. If it's an hour on Saturday, it's an hour on Saturday. Everyone understands that life happens, but then stick to that schedule, and
Mhm.
during that hour, during that 10 minutes, sit down and write something, and you'll be surprised at how much, once you get that first paragraph out, maybe that first or second paragraph, you'll be surprised at how quickly things will start flowing, and you'll kind of get into that mindset. But it is a creative mindset. It is difficult. I mean, I used to do, and I may end up going back to this, but for the last 5 years, I was in the film and well, for the last 20 years, I've been in film and film and TV production. But for the last 5 years, I would be working on a show for like 3 months or whatever. You'd work on a TV show, and during those 3 months, I would not be able to write at all because I was working like 14-hour days, crazy hours, overnights, all that kind of stuff, and there just wasn't any energy or time. And then when that show would be over, I would take 2 or 3 months and write. And it's very hard. It'd always be a transition phase for me where I had to get my brain kind of adjusted to this creative side of things again, because you're so business oriented, and you do have to have. So it is tricky. I do feel for people who try to fit it all in and create that schedule, but if you love it, you just gotta find a way.
Yeah, you really do. And I think you're right in terms of toggling, right? You have to toggle from the business side and being a business person to being the artist, right? To the creative brain. But I think that that is one of the beautiful things about authors, and especially authors that are able to do that, because you are accessing really all of your talents. You're looking at your business, you're developing yourself as a business person, but you're also really growing as a creative creature, as a creative artist. So do you find that you're able to toggle pretty easily from one to the other?
Yeah, I can toggle nowadays. I can move pretty deftly from doing business stuff to, okay, now I'm going to spend the next 2 hours, writing this story or working on this, script or whatever. Yeah, but you're learning how to be a professional, I guess, and you're learning how to, and it's habit. Once you do kind of figure out how to do it, um, it does become a little easier to kind of move back and forth. I think if I had to take, like I was saying, I think if I had to take like a month off and then come back to writing, I think it would take there'd be a transition period. But if I'm kind of writing something every day amongst doing all the business stuff I'm doing, um, it's pretty easy for me to kind of bounce around. Yeah. So and also I've learned to bounce between projects, which I was never really comfortable doing. Like a year ago, whatever I was working on was what I was working on, and I don't really have that luxury anymore. So, which is a good problem to have, obviously. But
Mhm.
I have to find jumping between. I'm writing one story for this person. I'm writing a script for this person, and I have to write this novel that's due. And so I spend time on each one, even sometimes all in the same afternoon, which is not something I was able to do very well about a year ago. So I think you do retrain yourself as long as you're doing it consistently. I think your brain kind of figures out the mechanisms for handling it.
So we've been talking a lot about your process and processes, but we haven't gotten to like what is your book about, my friend? And that is the coolest thing. I was looking at your book earlier today. So tell me about your book. Okay, what tell us a little bit about your book and um where did this story come from? What was the genesis for it?
So, A Child Alone with Strangers is coming out. Oh, yeah, there it is. It's coming out in like a week, right? Just over a week.
Mhm.
So I'm very excited. It's been a very long process. It was my first genre novel. So, meaning I've been writing for my whole life, and I've written a few novels, but up until this point, it wasn't. I'd only written more like, I hate to use the word literary, but by that I mean not genre fiction. And in 2015, I started writing genre fiction, and things really took off for me. And I think around 2018, I started writing this novel, and it took about 2 years to finish all in. A couple agents came and went, a couple publishers came and went. So it was, and even once I signed the contract with Skyhorse and Talos Press, who were putting it out, it was like about a year between when I signed the contract to now. And then there's been delays because of printing and all this other stuff that's going on
Mhm.
post COVID.
Mhm.
But the book itself is, I classify it as sort of like a kitchen sink book, in the sense that I kind of wanted it to be, I really grew up on all those big old horror books of the 80s, right? The Stephen King books and the Clive Barker, like Weave World and those kind of things. They were kind of epic, right? So I really wanted to create a book that was sort of an homage to a lot of the books that I grew up on. Um, and so I wanted it to kind of just be a really fun, trope filled, kind of chaotic doorstop novel. And I can show you, this is the book. I just got this a couple of days ago from the publisher. You can see it's
Ooh,
pretty thick.
nice.
It's six, yeah, it's 600 pages.
It looks like a
Um,
textbook from college.
yeah, right. Hopefully, it's a little more entertaining. But yeah, so it's the 600-page crime horror hybrid. So the base story, without giving any spoilers, is it's about a young boy who has a tragic goes through a tragic experience, and then he is kidnapped, and uh, and he's taken to this remote farmhouse in the middle of this giant forest expanse. Um, and there is something in the expansive forest surrounding this old farmhouse, um, that he kind of communes with telepathically, and
Mm.
between, and then basically between the boy and what he is communing with, uh, they kind of both want the same thing, which is they want to get rid of these kidnappers. So it's sort of, and then meanwhile, there's a crime thread, which is the FBI is hunting for him, and they're kind of chasing down clues. And these are both these things are sort of happening simultaneously, and then in the final act of the book, it all kind of comes together. So that's kind of the base of the story. So like I said, it's kind of got the telepathic kids, it's got the creature in the woods, it's got the the kidnappers, it's got the remote farmhouse, in the forest and stuff. So it's got a lot of those old classic tropes.
Yeah,
Sort
see,
of like
this is
thrown in
why
together.
Fern does not go out into the middle of a forest. I mean, because let's
No,
face it,
terrible idea.
scary horror things happen in the middle of forests, Russell.
Yeah.
I'm actually doing the show from the middle of my forest. There's a
I know it's actually
to this.
triggering me to see Russell's
And by the
background.
way, I got to say this. I don't mean to interrupt because you two have been quite entertaining, and I don't want you to stop. But the description of your book that is either in the back of the book or on your Amazon page that Amy sent us and that you sent us is spectacular. And it does what you want it to do, which after I read those, oh my gosh, this sounds so exciting. I gotta get this book. It's a
It sure
very
did.
it was, I don't know, did you write that? Did somebody else write that for you? They did a spectacular job, whoever did it.
Oh, the copy? No, the copy. Yeah, I'm still at that point where I write all that stuff. I'm hoping that
Well, you did a
well
great job, Philip.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
especially
yeah.
because, like at the end, right? Because everything you've just said is kind of what's on there, but then at the end, you have that little like, why is this entity so interested in helping this boy? And then that's like, I'm thinking to myself, oh my, what's going to happen? So
Yeah.
that is just wonderful hook right there.
What's in the damp, dark root cellar that it so badly wants to get back to? Yeah, and there's things like that you can. Thank you. I mean, it's things like writing copy is sort of ad copy is sort of like its own thing, but I do have a marketing background, so I have done that before. But also, you use the same kind of tricks that you use when you're writing prose, which is like, I don't need to mention that the root cellar is damp and dark, but I do in the ad copy because that's the kind of thing that'll hook you more than just saying, oh, there's something in the cellar. It's like, okay, that's kind of scary, but if it's a damp, dark root cellar, now all of a sudden you really kind of like want to know. So little things like that you can do to kind of like flavor it up for readers. But yeah, this is a haunted house. This is a roller coaster. This is pure entertainment. And it's just supposed to be a lot of fun. And so far, the reviews have been really good, and I've been really blown away with a lot of the reader response so far. I think people are having a lot of fun with it. So yeah, I'm
now
excited.
I'm guessing that this is kind of a standalone, right? One story about this young boy. So are you going to, because you say you're kind of new into the genre, is this going to be your genre? Like, do you feel like this is where you want to really focus in, or do you want to try other genres? Like, what are your feelings on that?
No, I love writing horror for sure. I've had a lot of success with it so far. And I haven't even had a novel out yet, but I've had a couple short story collections and a few novellas that have done well. So it's a good question. So I have right now, I have 4 books sold. Well, technically, 5 novels sold and a story collection and a children's book, but we'll focus on the novels. So I have this book coming out, and then I have a book called Gothic coming out, which it's not on Amazon, unfortunately, but this is what it looks like. This is the arc. It's very scary. So this is also like old school horror. This is coming out in February of 2023. And then I just did a 2-book deal with Tor Nightfire in the US and Orbit in the UK. So I'm doing 2 books with them, and those are both horror books. So the first one is called Boys in the Valley, which is coming out July of next year. And then I'm writing a second book for them that'll come out in 2024. Theoretically writing a second book for them. Something I got to get done the next few months here. But so point is that's all horror, right? But then I've also written a science fiction novel that my agent is currently shopping, and I've also written a thriller with like supernatural elements, but I wouldn't classify it as horror. It's more just kind of a straight thriller. So those are books I've already written and are being shopped. So I do like diversifying. I've sold a few science fiction stories to Inner Zone magazine that are coming out over the next 6 months or so. So I do like crossing genres. I enjoy very much, and I do this with my screenplays as well. I really like when combining two genres. So I like doing like Child Alone is sort of crime and horror hybrid. I like movies that kind of do that. You know, when you watch a movie and you'll get like half an hour into it and you think you know exactly what kind of movie it is, and then something will happen that'll turn it completely on its head, and you're like, oh man, this is actually a horror movie when I thought it was something else or whatever. And I like that. I like surprising readers. I mean, really, for me, when I write, is the number one thing that I want to accomplish is to be entertaining, and I want and be, in order to entertain readers, I have to entertain myself. So when I'm writing, if I start getting bored, or if I feel like where I'm going is very predictable, or if I feel like it's kind of like been there, done that, I take some time away to rethink, sort of like, open up my perspective a little bit and maybe rethink what I can do with that story. And I'll maybe just go completely different direction, even if it's for the sake of just going a completely different direction. And that's worked out for me so far. A lot of the early responses to these books have been surprised, pleasantly so, where you think you're kind of reading one story that you've read a lot, and then you realize you're reading something completely different. So that's something I try and do, because I really want readers to be entertained. I want them to have fun. I'm not looking to change the world. I don't cram socio-political issues into my stories. It's really just like, look, let's have a good time together, and let me take let me take your burden of maybe some things that are going on in your life away for a couple hours, and like let you just relax and have some fun and entertain you. And that's what I love to do, and that's my art, and that's what I
love
that's
that.
what
I
I
love
strive
that
for. Yeah.
because, we need that. There is a lot to be said for those who want to write more for like engendering a lot of thought provoking things. But in reality, those of us who are writing for fun, for enjoyment, for readers to just kick back and relax, that's a really important thing, because that's what books do offer you, that escape. Like you said, I mean, there's a lot of things going on in the world. We need some escapes to just enjoy, relax, and take our mind off things. I
Yeah.
thought, I don't know. Okay, so here's a question. Being a sci-fi horror lover, the aliens. You know, I feel like the new series with the Covenant, that started with Covenant, sort of began to do more, like you say, political and social commentary versus just the straight up, it's an animal that kills people, that's scary looking, and we just got to try to kill we got to try to survive the evil monster, which is really what Aliens was in the beginning. And I was totally cool with it just being that. I don't know how you feel about the aliens, or if that's a thing for you.
Well, yeah, it's the same thing when I watch a movie, and I think, look, I think the if you're in the media business, whether it be a filmmaker or a writer, I think your number one objective always has to be entertaining and to create a quality product. If And then you can kind of do whatever you want. But if you don't do that first thing, then the other things don't really matter. Like if Alien Covenant was a fantastic movie and it had all these whatever messages it was trying to relay, then a lot would be forgiven for that, or it would be okay. But it wasn't a good movie. It was a bad movie on top of like also not be. So and I do think I have there are as a writer, you have a lot of different ways to get your work out there. So I have a book called Don't Let Them Get You Down, which is a very heavy book, which is not made to be entertaining so much as it is. It's kind of like deals a lot with depression and anxiety, and it is still entertaining. And it is still very well written, but it's not like a genre book where I'm like saying, "Hey, here's a good time, go have fun with this." It's a pretty heavy book. So I published that book with a small press called Zagava, and that book is coming out before the end of this year. But so I can still do those kind of projects, but those projects are they're separate a little bit from sort of the stuff I'm writing for like more of a mainstream audiences or whatever, mainstream readers. So you have the option to do anything you want, and you can write essays and you can write articles and you can do all these other things where you can express a lot of those themes and opinions. I just feel like from a reader perspective, if you pick up a book like this, you don't want me to talk about, politics. You want to hear,
Right.
you want to be scared, and you want to enjoy the ride. So I try and kind of diversify. So if I wanted to write something maybe that had some themes in it that I felt were important to me, or were, maybe more, more serious, or more tied into society and stuff like that, I would still be okay to write that book. But I would probably make sure that readers knew that what they were getting into, and that it was sort of like a separate thing. I wouldn't sneak it into, I wouldn't sneak it into the fun stuff. You know, that's just, but
Right.
that's just my philosophy, and I
Although,
think people
although I
can do
think
it however they
you
want.
with your characters, and with horror, especially with your characters, you're putting them in these situations where psychologically they're going to be tested. So you could do some, looking at delving at, how do you survive trauma, right? Because I mean, I don't know, if I was in the woods and some evil entity was trying to kill me,
Oh, if you were on
or
a
whatever,
patio and saw a bug, you would have trauma, Fern.
I would be
Hmm.
traumatized. I would, and then I'd have to figure out how to deal with that trauma, But it's definitely a good place to explore those kinds of issues, but like to do it in a fun way, that it's not like in your face
Yeah,
exploration.
and I think to each their own, but you get into trouble with that a little bit. And I'll give you an example. I wrote a novella called Shiloh, which is a horror novella that takes place during the Battle of Shiloh in the Civil War. And I researched that battle heavily. I spent like 3 4 weeks just doing research, and researched as I was writing it. And and ultimately, it's a horror story. It's about, there's angels, there's demons, there's green glowing blood, there's cannibal. It's a horror story. But I would get, not a lot, but I got a couple comments, reviews, where people were like, Civil War bus came out. Well, it's actually gun boats, not gun ships, and it's like,
Oh
yeah,
yeah,
but there's
yeah,
also
yeah.
like demons riding horseback through the middle. It's not a historical piece of fiction. So I think that's where you get into trouble sometimes when you try and do both. And I think same goes with, so one of the critiques I've gotten about Child Alone with Strangers is I've had a couple early reviewers say, you don't understand how to write trauma, because
Mhm.
what the child goes through in the book is very traumatic. And in my defense, I actually did explore, and what I mean by trauma is, I mean physical trauma. And what I
Right.
did explore exactly what a child would go through with certain elements of physical trauma. I did speak to nurses. I did speak to a doctor. So I did do that research, and I did create what I believe to be a very believable, if maybe somewhat tweaked, timeline of
Mhm.
events, so that the story would still work. But I tried the best I could to kind of make it also realistic. And I got people, a lot of early reviewers were kind of came at me about, oh, well, he would be way more this or way more that, or you're doing this. And it's like, again, I'm not writing, this isn't a medical treatise. This is a book about
Mhm.
a kid with telepathic abilities, and creatures in the woods who are, so you got to be careful too. It's like you don't want people to think that you're trying to, do something that would be considered nonfiction when you're writing fiction. I try to keep it very much fiction, without, but also realistic, so that you're invested in the story and you buy into what's happening. But it can be tricky, and you're going to get criticism no matter what. But yeah, I do try and keep it all separated when I'm trying to write something serious, or that has, what I feel real world implications. I try and keep that separate from my fun stuff.
Philip, you're a real open book on what you're doing and how you deal with criticism and what your criticisms are. Uh, is that just from your experience in the media industry for 20 years?
I don't know. I think probably, I don't know. I think I think there are people who probably do a better job of handling criticism than I do. I think it's easier to handle criticism when you have achieved a certain level of success, because you realize that, for every one very vocal critic, there are 100 maybe non-vocal critics who are, who maybe like your work, or who are more positive about your work. I think, but when you're starting out, and you're kind of like, and you're kind of clutching to each review or each response, and you're only, you're not getting a lot of, you don't have a wide readership, and you're sort of just coming up, and you don't really know if your stuff is good. Is it not good? Is it going to be, how successful can you be? Is this going to be a dream killer? Is it going to be? So I think you tend to get more, I think you're always more sensitive when you first start out, and you're more reliant on a good review, or you're more reliant on a good, like reader review. And I think as you become more popular and you have a more bigger readership, each individual review becomes less of a gut punch, because you're just getting so much more awareness overall, and it doesn't really matter as much. So I think I'm still kind of in that transition period from, still monitoring like what the responses to people are from my stories and books, and hopefully I'll get past it. But I also think I like to look at critical reviews, because I find them very interesting, and I find them informative to a degree. And I don't take it to heart, but I do think about it. And if I get 10 people saying the same thing, I think about that. And I'm like, well, wait a minute, maybe this is something I should actually be looking at. And maybe it's something I can improve upon. Because if you're not improving upon your craft, then you're not doing the right thing, going the right way. Right. So
and I
try to take it too personally, but I do listen.
Yeah. And one of the things that as a writer, you need to remember is that you are an artist, and art sits differently with different people. Yeah. I mean, you are going to have your audience, the people who love your art and for whom your art, resonates and they enjoy it. And they're going to be people who are going to be like, okay, no, I don't want it, but it doesn't negate the excellence of your art. That there's a group of people who don't like it necessarily. I mean, there's people who don't like Picasso, and there's people who adore it. And it doesn't really say whether or not he's a good painter. He's obviously a great painter. It's just, who does that art speak to, right? And our art, your art, speaks to a particular, because I'm sure there's like some of our followers may be thinking, oh, horror, no, ooh, I would never read a horror book. And that's okay. For them, horror is not the thing. But there's a lot of our followers who love horror, so they're going to love your book, right? So for those of us who love horror, it's going to be the art that speaks to us.
Yeah, obviously art is very subjective. And, having written a couple short story collections, I can tell you I've had some pretty humorous moments where I would be reading, and I don't read reviews too much anymore because there's no point, but where I would be reading a review of my story collection, and this is the God's honest truth. I would read one review where it said, my favorite story in this book was X. My least favorite story in this book was Y. And the very next review right under that review was, my favorite story was Y, my least favorite story was X. And I took a screenshot of it because I wanted to remember that moment where it's like, you can't write for everybody. And you just try and hope that like most people enjoy your voice. And that's another thing that I tell writers too, when I speak to new writers. I'm like, the most important thing is to have a voice, because you'll find a readership for your voice. It may be a small readership, and maybe a large readership, but ultimately, you will find a readership if you are true to your voice and you have a unique voice. There's no such thing as a unique story really anymore, but there is such thing as telling a story in a unique way. And I think it's important for writers to believe in themselves and to believe in their voice. And that's something that I try and do. And I definitely try and write for me. And like I said earlier, like, I want to be entertained. I want to enjoy what I'm writing. I want to be Thomas Oldehoveld, who I mentioned earlier. He said something when we were sitting around, having drinks. He was like, I want to write a novel that I would want to read. And, and I love filling those, those little gaps where it's like, what if I really want to read a novel about this? And then he's like, well, I'm just going to write that novel. So yeah, it's all good. And I think, like I said, art is very subjective, and you just kind of want to you just hope people like it because you put so much time and energy into it. And you want it to be, but it's hard, not, it'd be not human to not think that way. But you just hope you find more good than bad when it comes to response.
Yeah. I mean, you'll connect with your audience for sure. And, thank you so much for coming, because it's been a really great conversation. And I know that we're coming towards the end. I want to give us time to wrap up so that Russell doesn't give us those laser eyes of because he's the one that keeps us on time.
Gotcha.
Russell.
Philip, she's being a little sarcastic.
Mhm.
I only drop at
Slightly.
them after the show. I don't give them laser during the show.
He does give us laser. Amy, does he not throw us
He
those
does
laser
this
eye
thing.
flies?
This
Yeah.
is his
Oh,
signal.
yeah.
You know, that's where, and you know, it's one of those things where it's I don't know, it's just like my dad, right? When my dad gets mad, he raises like arches one eyebrow, and you just know to like shut up. So I know when Russell goes like this, I need to just shut up. Like I have learned over
Mhm.
the years, and I don't want that to happen.
This
But-
is all just allegations and not
No,
proven
he is,
truths.
Philip, he is training us. He's training us to be timely, apparently.
I love
Sure.
it. I love it. So closing comments, questions, statements. Russell, let's go to you.
Okay, Philip, you your interview went completely different than I expected. I could listen to you another couple of interviews between you and Fern because you haven't covered so many things that I wanted you to, but you're like an open book. You're very amazing, and congratulations on all your success and all your books. It's pretty amazing. And by the way, that's a very cool last name you have too.
Oh, thank you. It's Fracassi. Yeah, it's Sicilian, I think.
Oh,
Oh, nice.
Definitely
Well, I
Italian.
mean,
Yes, it's
I
Sicilian.
think from the north. Yeah.
we'll
I'm not
definitely have a
Italian.
chance
A
to.
little bit.
I hope we'll have a chance to get you back over here because I mean, you've got some new books coming out, and you've got books that you're working on. So I'm sure we will get a chance to chat with you some more in the future. And I am looking forward to reading your book because I mean, I thought it was like super interesting. The little when I was looking at it, and I enjoy horror, so yes, I'm totally in.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. And what I would just say is, one last thing that I guess I would throw in as a last comment would be, Fern, you mentioned that horror. You know, I wrote an essay about the horror genre for the American Library Association, and one of the things I commented on is I think horror is a lot more range and breadth than most people realize who don't read horror. And I think people think it's vampires and it's serial killers and all stuff. And there's some amazing, beautiful books being written in the horror field right now, very, by diverse authors and new voices, and some wonderful literature being put out. So if you're listening to this and you're afraid of reading horror, go ask your librarian or your local bookseller, tell them some authors that you like, and dip your toes into the horror world. They'll put you in a good direction for some horror authors that would be more kind of aligned with the things that you like. But don't be afraid. It's a good genre. There's a lot of good stuff happening right now.
Definitely.
I love it. Well, Philip, thank you so much for taking time out of your early morning to come and talk to us. Because I'm telling you, no one can get me up at 7:50 in the morning besides my kids, and I'm doing good to look decent. Okay, and you look fabulous. So thank you so much
It's
for
the hat.
getting up. Yes, I'm telling you, I should just invest in hats. I think that would be great. But thank you so much for taking that time and for coming. This has been such a fascinating and interesting conversation. And you are welcome back anytime. Whenever you have a new book coming out, please let us know. And you're welcome back anytime. But you guys, we hope everybody has a great Monday and a great rest of the week. And until next time, you guys, we will find you all next Monday morning. Bye, everybody.